Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to FP1. Now let's talk about the Singapore Grand Prix. Now apologies if this video does come out a little bit later than usual, just as I've been moving back into uni. It's just been a tiny bit stressful and taken a while to get everything set up at the new uni house. But we're all ready to go now and still hoping to get videos uploaded at least once per week, hopefully twice. We'll have to wait and see. Now Singapore then as a race has usually been a bit hit or miss. We've had some fantastic races, say like 2017, 2010, races like that, but then also bore fests like last year. I think after the first few laps, it was just a bit of procession. Now this race, it was pretty good. I think there's lots of things to talk about, lots of key points to inter-team rivalries, things like that, collisions between drivers, which we'll get to in a minute. So let's get started then. So let's begin then by talking about lap one. Lots of things to talk about here. Firstly, the Ferraris and their fantastic start. Like obviously Leclerc flew ahead of the field, just drove away at that point. Vettel didn't have a bad start as well. He was right behind Hamilton, clearly showing that Ferrari had a lot more pace this weekend, which I don't think anyone really expected, especially given how strong they were in Monza. We were all expecting them just to fall back behind Mercedes in Singapore, but that was not the case whatsoever. A fantastic battle at the start between Hamilton and Vettel. Bottas and the other Mercedes just struggled a bit. I think he fell behind Verstappen at the start and nearly back into the clutches of the Renaults and the McLarens in those first couple of laps. Brought it back in the end. Obviously, he was told to slow down when Hamilton came in for his pit stop just to stop him falling behind himself and Albon. Do I agree with that? Oh, not particularly. I'll get onto my views on team wars in a little bit because we got a few more to talk about before that. But yeah, an interesting call from Mercedes. They did agree. They did come in at the end of the race and basically said, "Yeah, we got it wrong. We messed up strategy this weekend," which is a bit rare from Mercedes, at least nowadays. Obviously, we've seen some big blunders from them at all. It seems that either Mercedes have a master stroke in terms of their strategy or they absolutely screw everything up. It's usually a bit of a mix between the two. But yeah, not the best race from them today. Hamilton, of course, 4th, Valtteri Bottas 5th. Of course, in regards to the drivers' and constructors standings, it's still pretty much given that Hamilton will win the championship and Mercedes will win the constructors. But it's, yeah, not the best race from them today. Other things to talk about at the start is, of course, that collision between Nico Hülkenberg and Carlos Sainz put both really out of contention for the race. I mean, actually, that said, Hülkenberg got back for P9, but I think had issues at the end of the race as well, so you never know how much further he could have got up. But I don't know. I'd say racing is lap one. You've got to call it a racing incident. Hülkenberg went for a move, didn't really exist. It's probably a little bit optimistic. Just clashed with the rear of Carlos Sainz's car, and that was that, really. Do feel bad for Carlos Sainz. He only made it back to P12, having had a pretty stellar qualifying as well. So, yeah, big shame for him today. McLaren, and of course, the midfield fight, we're talking about the McLaren Renault. I think that's really going to be the big battle for P4. Now, McLaren getting a few points up on Renault this weekend. Obviously, the other way around was a fantastic race for Renault at Monza. But Lando Norris, P7, a really good race for him, actually. He kind of went under the radar. Qualifying was a bit, I don't know, not fantastic. I think he said he had a bit of a brain phase as well. But really came back at the race. Best, really, McLaren could have got, I think. Now, one team that did disappoint today was Red Bull. And now, obviously, that might seem a little bit weird. Of course, Max Verstappen got a podium. And Albon P6, obviously still staying in that top 6. But this is a track where we really thought they could fight. And go back in previous years, 2017, Danny Rick nearly won the Grand Prix, finished second. 2018, Max Verstappen nearly passed Hamilton for the win. So this is definitely a circuit where they're good at. A circuit that the Red Bulls, although they haven't had a win since 2013, I want to say, it's definitely a track which suits their car. And yeah, big surprise just not to see them up with the Ferraris and even really Mercedes today. I think on paper, the Mercs probably had a faster car, and Max kind of got a bit lucky with the strategy. But yeah, just a weird showing from Red Bull. I think Max Verstappen came out not particularly happy with his team as well. Albon, just a little bit quiet today, P6. Nothing really much to talk about. Didn't have many, stellar moves on anyone. Just, again, a bit of an under-the-radar race. Not like a massive showing. I think this is really the first weekend where we can compare Albon and Verstappen, as obviously they've had grid penalties and clashes in the last two. And obviously, we were expecting Verstappen to come out on top. Now, looking at the gaps, Albon was, 11 seconds behind the lead. Obviously, that's kind of skewed because we had a late safety car. So it's kind of weird. It's a bit difficult to see how far back Albon really was. Qualifying, he was about 6/10 or something off the pace off the top of my head. So we'll have to see how that goes in the next few races. I'm still pretty adamant that Albon will get that second seat no matter what he does. It won't be, it won't be difficult to beat what Gasly did. I think Helmut Marko's already come out and basically said that Red Bull seat is a straight fight between Gasly and Albon. And once he said that, it's pretty obvious to know that Albon will be in that second seat. They're not going to give Gasly another chance. I just can't see that happening. Now, moving on from Red Bull, let's talk about an ex-Red Bull driver, Daniel Ricciardo. Now, just bad luck strikes him again today. For those that don't know, he was disqualified from qualifying for a power surge in the MG UK. Now, I kind of have strong feelings about this. I understand why they've done it. I understand why they disqualified Ricciardo. But at the end of the day, the lap that the power spike was on was not the lap that got him through to Q2. It gave him a millionth of a second of advantage. Now, that is coming from Renault, so, maybe we need to take that with a pinch of salt. But, on the flip side, I see that, the FIA have got to stamp their foot down. The regulations are there. I just think it was a little bit harsh. Maybe a grid penalty might have been, maybe more appropriate in that instance. But hey, I guess the rules are there. We've got to stick by them. And, I guess the FIA just did their job. On to Ricciardo's actual race then. Started really, really well. Got quite up the field. Got into the points as well. Did some fantastic overtaking moves early in the race. Up until the point where he clashed with Antonio Giovinazzi. Now, this move, it was going down the inside of turn 4 or turn 5, I think. It reminded me very much of a move later or earlier on in the race between Sebastian Vettel and I think it was Pierre Gasly. Yeah, and almost identical. Vettel dives down the inside, going for, I think it was P2 at this point. Gasly hadn't pitted, and there was a little bit of contact. Gasly moved over into the runoff. They've installed some new curbs on the runoff this year, so you can't just run wide as easily. And I think that's kind of made it a bit, it's made drivers a little bit more tentative to go out that wide, and I guess that's what they're there for. In this case, Giovinazzi just did not go wide, wants to keep his position. I'd say a racing incident. There was nowhere, like Giovinazzi, if he'd gone wide, he would have damaged his car on the curbs. He didn't want to do that. Daniel Ricciardo, the oversteer coming out of that corner was going to drive him in that direction anyway. I think they didn't obviously make any penalties on that incident, and I think that's, to be fair, perfectly fair. But yeah, I think after that, obviously Ricciardo got a puncture from that, and I don't think Giovinazzi came off particularly lightly as well. And that after that, he just sort of dropped back. Didn't have a fantastic restart after the safety car as well. Lost about 3 positions. The late collision, I think, between Raikkonen and Kvyat, I think, sort of brought him back up the field a little bit. But P14, not the best race for the Aussie today. Now, another team that struggled a bit today, I think, was Force India. Now, I think Stroll, I think he got a puncture after one of the safety cars. I still don't quite know how that came about. Whether it was contact with another car, whether it was just a tyre failure, we don't know. But that dropped it back to P13. And then, of course, Sergio Perez, what we now know was an oil leak, having to pull alongside down the back straight, I think it was. So, yeah, just not the best race for Racing Points there. Of course, they were, again, also being considered in that fight for 4th place. I think now Racing Point will probably sit maybe 6th by the end of the year, unless they have some massive turnaround in these last few races. Obviously, there's quite a lot behind them this weekend. They brought this massive upgrade package that lasted the season as well. But yeah, just didn't really see it to its full potential today. Now, 2 big crashes I want to get into. Firstly, the crash between Romain Grosjean and George Russell. Now, of course, Grosjean having that brand new contract at Haas. And again, this weekend just didn't really show why he got it. That's just my opinion. Qualified well behind Kevin Magnussen, his teammate. Dropped out of Q1, I think. And then just this accident with Russell, it was just unnecessary. I think there was a point in that overtake where Grosjean should have realised that really he's not going to pull this off around the outside. Maybe he was just surprised that the Williams had speed coming out of the corner. It's not something that we really associate Williams with, speed, this season. But yeah, Grosjean just had a fantastic exit, despite maybe taking the suboptimal line through that turn. And he just got tagged into the wall. And I don't know whether Grosjean got a penalty for it. Off the top of my head, actually, now I think about it. But I think that one definitely should have been deserved. Had he not got a penalty, I'd be surprised. I need to check if he has or not. But, yeah, just a weird race from Grosjean there. Maybe because he's got his contract, he's now sort of a little bit more lax. And obviously he can make these mistakes. It's not going to affect him. But, yeah, just a bit of a shambles from him today. Now, the other crash to talk about is obviously the collision between Danny Kvyat and Kimi Raikkonen in the closing stages of the race. Now, Kvyat blamed Raikkonen. Raikkonen, I think, has pretty much blamed Kvyat. I've got to side with Kimi on this one. It was a bit of an optimistic move from Danny Kvyat jumping down the inside of turn 1. We've seen overtakes there before. I don't think Kimi was particularly expecting Daniel to come from that far back. But yeah, at that point, it was too late. He committed, just collided with Raikkonen. It wasn't a particularly heavy contact, but it was enough to break the suspension on Kimi's car. And yeah, just a shame, really. It could have been a good race for Alfa today. Of course, Giovinazzi did get 10th initially, but got penalised for running too close to one of the pickup trucks collecting Russell's car. So yeah, big shame from Alfa Romeo today. Could have got some big points, but yeah, so they just fell away. Now to finish off then, probably the biggest talking point from the front of the race. I think a lot of the action was maybe more in the midfield, but everything going on with Ferrari, very, very big. So just to run down what happened, obviously Leclerc got away first, steaming away at the top of the pack, but it was Sebastian Vettel that was pitted first out of the two of them. And that, of course, let him get a superior overcut. Had a really good pit stop as well. I think there might have been a slight issue with the timing systems in the pits. It registered it as 3 seconds, but we all kind of thought it was a bit quicker than that. But anyway, Vettel, fantastic few outlaps, got ahead of Leclerc and steamed ahead. And I think a lot of Leclerc fans are a little bit angry that was allowed to happen. Leclerc obviously was not particularly happy as well. But let's think back to... Well, yeah, let's first go back to the Belgian Grand Prix where we actually saw an identical thing happen. They pitted Vettel first. Vettel came out. Obviously, by the end of the race, had these awful tyres that would probably, they probably weren't going to last him the end of the race. Had no pace in comparison to Leclerc. And Ferrari said, yeah, okay, Vettel let him through. You're just going to hold him up. And in the end, Vettel played quite a good support role and stopped Lewis Hamilton basically challenging for the win on that race. Now, this time around, it was a little bit different. Now, obviously, Vettel, again, probably wouldn't have had the best tyres at the end of the Grand Prix, but his pace in comparison to Charles Leclerc was fine. It wasn't awful. In fact, he was probably pulling away at some points, and Leclerc just wasn't actually as quick as Vettel, which is a bit different than what we've seen for the previous part of the last 4 or 5 races. Now, it's an interesting one to call. I can see Leclerc's side of the story. He obviously had a fantastic pole position, did really, really well, and then, he feels like he's had this win stolen away by strategy. But really, at the end of the team, they're not going to be fighting for the Drivers' Championship, really, or the Constructors. They're just trying to get the best results for the team at this point. And they just want to have a 1-2. Does it really matter what driver gets a 1-2 since both of them aren't really in contention for the championship this year? No, they just want to have the 1-2. And had they pitted Leclerc first, it could have jeopardised that 1-2. We could have seen Vettel fall behind Verstappen, Hamilton, maybe even Bottas. It's impossible to call these sort of things. And I think what Ferrari were doing, they were consolidating the point that they got the most out of their weekend. They would have got the most points. And that just makes sense in my view. And I think with a lot of the team orders that have come along the last few years, it sort of feels, in some people's minds, unfair that Leclerc wasn't allowed to take that win back. But this is Singapore. If those two get involved in the collision, can you imagine the uproar? And also, can you imagine the amount of people that say, they should have just kept them 1-2 and let them save their engines? So I think it was a smart move from Ferrari today. We don't say that very often. But honestly, since coming back from the summer break, 3 out of 3, really, really good end of the season for them so far. It's just a shame that they couldn't do this at the beginning of the season and really give us a good championship fight. But with the whole team orders thing, and this is going to be sort of my end of video rant, and I obviously I don't agree with team orders. I don't think many people would agree with team orders, and I can see why they're quite hard to manage in a way. I think there was obviously that instant that Fernando was faster than you to Felipe Massa in, I think it was Germany 2010. And at that point, that was sort of when the FI just said, we can't really control these team orders. We've just got to let them do it. We'll just make it legal again. And obviously you had instances like the Multi-21, where obviously Vettel and Webber didn't necessarily agree over that one. And there's been countless instances since. And I just feel like just to get the racing back, just so we can see some proper hard racing on track, that they can just bring team orders back in and just make it illegal again, And obviously it's hard to manage that. You can't fine teams, which is what they used to do, because you just find them, say, 10 grand or something like that, 20 grand, and to a team that's absolutely pennies, that's not going to be much of a deterrent at all. At the same time, you can't really harm the driver because it's not really the driver's fault if it's the team making the call. So I have an idea. I had a long think about this last night, and I think the only really way they can manage it is if a team, let's say Mercedes say, okay, Bottas, you're going to slow down, let Hamilton overtake. At that point, Mercedes should be docked constructors' points. Now, I want your opinions on this, because I know some people might say, oh, no, you shouldn't be messing with the championship like that. But if you docked constructors' points, especially for a team like Mercedes, or even maybe more apparently at teams like Renault or McLaren in the midfield, if you lose constructors' points, especially in places like the midfield, that is big for your championship. I can see the midfield fight really coming down to a matter of 2 or 3 points. I think if Renault can get their act together in these last few races, it's going to be very close between them and McLaren at the end of the season. Now, had they lost points from a team orders penalty, that could mean the difference between P4 and P5, and then they are suddenly getting a big financial hit, because every place in the championship at the end of the year is a massive financial gain for the teams. So obviously you've seen this massive fight for P4 in recent years because that massive step up in pay grade that the teams get. So obviously I want your opinions on that. Is that maybe interfering with the championship and the racing too much? But then again, are team orders interfering with the racing too much? I just want your opinions on that topic. But that'll be all from me today. I hope you did enjoy the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and of course subscribe. And let me know what you guys thought of the Singapore Grand Prix in the comments below. And I'll try and get back to as many of you as I can. See you guys in the next one.